Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Amplify Your Business. Today, I am joined by a real life hero. So, this lady has been in the Air Force for 20 years, I think, and has started now a couple businesses. So, I'm really excited to get into her backstory. So, welcome to the show, Tammy Barlette, co founder of Athena's Voice and founder of Crosscheck.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you bringing me on.
So, before we get into the two businesses that you are currently involved with, I want to hear from you what you feel are the three most important things that every entrepreneur needs to really know or understand.
Absolutely. That's important. So, first of all, I would say tell people don't do it alone. Even though you may be an entrepreneur and a solopreneur and you're by yourself, there's so much to it and you just can't go down this journey and this path alone. The second thing is don't give up. It is absolutely going to be difficult and there will be challenges that you didn't expect and you have to expect that. So when you expect challenges you don't expect, just, dig deep, remember why you're doing it and keep going. And then the last thing that kind of ties into this is it's important that you define success for you. That
Mm,
was actually one of my struggles in the beginning. The idea of what a successful business was something much bigger than I was actually capable and or interested in creating. And so that created a lot of disharmony for me. So you have to make sure that you define what success means for you, and it doesn't have to be what society thinks success is.
yeah, you don't have to be the next Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, right? You can
Yeah,
still have
exactly.
have a very successful business and life and everything else. So I am curious, before we get into learning a little bit more about your business, then how do you define success?
Well, success for my business really is it has to, first of all, be work really well with my family lifestyle. That is
Yeah.
kind of foundational. But the most important thing as far as business goes is that I'm making a positive impact in people's lives. And in order to do that, you don't have to reach thousands and thousands of people. You can have what I think of as a more of a boutique business, even if it's not like an actual boutique store. That's
Yeah.
what I realize is that I don't have to be this huge, ginormous corporation with tons of employees. In fact, that's not even what I wanted. So I was self sabotaging truly.
Yeah.
So for me, it's making an impact and it matching with my personal lifestyle and family.
Yeah, and I would also add to that too is even though your business might be more boutique in terms of size, the impact that you're making on individuals has that ripple effect, the pebble in the pond, where it does impact so many more beyond the people that you're necessarily talking to. Especially when we talk about the businesses that you have. I mean, those have some profound impact on individuals that then can carry on and have some really interesting, interactions and impacts on everybody else in their lives. So really exciting stuff. So let's get into that though. So tell me a little bit about Athena's Voice. What problems are you trying to solve there? What's that business all about? And then we'll talk about Crosscheck after that.
Okay. Yeah. Athena's voice basically grew out of an idea that really the seed was planted by my husband. He
Okay.
said to me a couple years before I retired, he said, "Hey, I know what you're going to do when you retire." And I thought, "Oh, here we go. Tell me, what am I going to do?" And I was curious. So I said, "Okay, what am I going to do?" And he said, "Motivational speaking." And I was sitting literally right at this desk here, not at this house, but this desk. I
Yeah.
remember because it was so like, what? I got a little nauseous and I thought to myself, no, that's not. I don't want to be up on stage, in the limelight. That's just not for me.
Yeah.
And then I let it sit for a while and I thought about it and I realized lots of different things. First of all, I realized there's not a lot of women out there speaking. And because there's not a lot of women who've done what I've done, there's definitely not that many of them out there speaking. And I think it's important to get those stories out there and not just the stories. There's some power in seeing is believing. You know, I was teaching at pilot training at the time, and it still looked pretty much the same as it had when I had gone through with respect to gender. Now, I am not looking for gender equality in numbers necessarily, just equality in opportunity. And I don't think that'll ever
Yep.
equate numbers, 50-50. And that's totally fine with me. It's just opportunity. But there was still women saying things like, oh, I don't want to go fighters because I want to have a family. And I'm like, I have 3 kids and I flew fighter aircraft. You can do these things. So I thought it was important to get my story out there. And, initially when my husband mentioned it, I thought, I don't want to be my ego. Like, I don't want to be up on stage. I don't need that. And I realized that the truth is that it was actually a disservice to others to not share my story
Yeah.
because I can help others. And then I partnered up with Heather Penny, who was already on the speaking circuit, and we put Athena's Voice together, and we recruited several other female fighter pilots, and we put together, basically it started as a speakers bureau, and now it's a speaker referral business. So if people are looking for, a powerful female who's a military aviator, you can go to our website, athenasvoiceusa.com, and I'll match you with a great speaker who can make an impact in your organization.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really neat model because you're taking all of these very inspirational individuals who have served and have, faced all types of adversity, and you're leveraging those experiences to help motivate and inspire other people. And again, it's that the ripple effect of that is just massive, I think, which is really cool. So now that's the first business, and you were doing this business since you exited the military, I think you said. So you served for 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
and so back in 2018 then is when you were
Yes.
exiting, and you created this business, and then more recently in 2022, so about a year ago,
Mm-hmm.
you created CrossCheck. So tell us a little bit about CrossCheck.
Yeah, CrossCheck is a business where I do mental performance coaching for aviators. The
Okay.
world has a lot of mental performance coaches for athletes, and the profession that uses mental performance coaching the most is professional athletes. And they've discovered there's something to it. There's something to using mental performance to reach your full and highest potential. And they're
Yeah.
really that industry is really tapping into the mental performance industry. But I realized, I thought to myself, are you kidding me? Like, golfers are using this, but their lives aren't on the line. And I don't care if you're flying a Cessna 172 or you're flying an A-10 Warthog. You're putting your life on the line, and if you are not on it when you're flying, you're putting yourself in more danger. And one of the
Yeah.
sayings I like to say, and it's basically the catchphrase for the company, is you can't just pull over on a cloud.
Hmm.
So we really need to grasp and control our emotions and our thoughts and our focus. It's so very important. And I'm like, we need to get this in the aviation industry as just the norm.
Yeah.
So that's what I decided to do. I actually got a certification for mental performance for athletes, and I transitioned it to apply it to pilots.
Well, that's really cool. And so you've been doing it for a year. So how has that been for you? What kind of success have you found, or challenges along the way, I guess, in building that business?
Yeah, well, I actually, in just backing up a little bit, I've been doing this longer than I realized, because part of the reason I started the business was I spent I spent 11 years of my 20-year career instructing,
Yeah.
and probably even more than that if I looked at it. I flew the whole 20, but I was actually in pilot training as an instructor full time for 11 of the years because I loved it. And although I did a lot of stick and rudder instruction, clearly that was my job. What I realized that was more impactful than that stick and rudder instruction was the mental performance coaching that I didn't even realize I was doing,
Hmm.
because a lot of the issues were not that they couldn't do a stall or they couldn't land. It was what was going on inside of their mind. And I would work with them on that because I cared. It mattered to me. And so that's where I realized it was a really effective method in helping people work through their aviation struggles. And since then, I've worked with several people in CrossCheck, and the results have been really pretty phenomenal. People, they don't realize that they're not really controlling their thoughts, and
Hmm.
that will truly affect your subconscious, and it affects your performance and your focus, and it's a cycle. So it's been very effective. As far as the challenges go, um, I'm working on creating a course, and there's that whole perfectionism, which is part of mental performance training, right?
Yeah.
But I'm starting to apply the 80% solution now is better than the 100% solution never.
Yeah.
So even though everything's not perfect, this content needs to get out there. And so November 5th, I'm putting it out there and we're going forward, because perfect is the enemy of good, right?
Yeah, yeah, completely. Yeah, and that's such a monumental thing to create, because when it comes to course development, we work with clients on my business side anyway, with different people who are doing that, and it is something where you could work on and tweak something forever and never actually get it done completely to everybody's satisfaction, because it is so nuanced, right?
Right.
And so yeah. Now, I liked how you were tying in or referencing the mental performance, I guess, principles as you're working through, that challenge yourself, right? I'm
Hmm.
really curious because our audience are other entrepreneurs, right, and business
Hmm.
leaders, and so these are people who, they're not in the situation where they don't have any clouds to land on, because they don't have that issue per se, but they have to perform at a high level in order to continue to scale their business and deal with all the things that are pulling them in all the different directions that every entrepreneur does. So, knowing what you know about
Hmm.
mental performance and your experiences as an entrepreneur, what would be some of the biggest things, I guess, that you could share with our audience that would maybe help them perform better in their, corporate um, lives, I guess?
Sure, of course. Yeah, when I give my keynote, I talk about how you can't just pull over on a cloud, but the truth is in life you can't either. It keeps going.
Yeah.
Um, so the biggest thing I kind of already addressed it in the beginning, but one thing is important to is your perspective on challenges.
Okay.
So, first of all, expecting challenges. Most people do that. But the thing is, you have to expect that there's going to be challenges that exceed what you expected. So I know
Yeah.
that sounds kind of twisted, but the truth is you have to go, okay, I knew there's gonna be challenges and yep, I knew they're gonna be bigger than I thought. And this one's definitely bigger than I thought. So how am I gonna approach this? Start that when you have that challenge, you can think of it, well, am I gonna look at it as a problem or am I gonna look at it as like a challenge to be solved, like a puzzle that I want to solve? So that just that framework of it right there will help free a little bit of your mind. If you see it as a problem, you're kind of limiting yourself. Whereas if you
Mhm.
go, okay, this is like, how can I solve this? How can I figure this one out?
Yep.
That puts you in a much better place. The other thing preemptively you can do is think through the challenges you expect. So sit down and write down your what ifs. Those things that keep you up at night, that things that go, what if this happens? So, like for me, let's say I'm giving a virtual keynote and I lose my internet. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
So if that's a what if that's not solved, it's going to affect my performance, going to affect me going forward. So what do? I actually record my entire keynote in advance and I send them a link to it and say, if we lose internet, here it is. So it's solved. So you can address some of those things in advance. And the other thing, that does is when you think through a problem that you expect to happen, and you have to think through step by step, not just a 60,000-foot view, but like detailed. Let's say you put yourself in the scenario. What are you going to do? Because the other thing that does for you is even if that particular problem never comes your way, you are already more mentally prepared and like mentally capable to handle the problems that do come. You'll stay more calm and you'll work through them quicker.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and I can see that. Like, it's all really about the prep, right? And just thinking. I've never been in the military, but just thinking of what you know I see in movies and whatnot, and what I think is probably happening. I mean, it's really, you guys spend so much time on the preparation side of things, in in all of the drills, all of the
Mm-hmm.
training, that it's just repetition, 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 right? And that's where you probably just inherently have all these performance based practices that are just part of it, because that's what makes for better outcomes, whether it's on the battlefield or up in the plane, right?
Right. You hit the nail on the head. That's actually that's what I call it, preparation, and specifically preparing for those what if scenarios. I didn't realize until I got out of the military how how much preparation we did. It was the norm. So when I
Mm-hmm.
got out of the military and I was like, well, do you have this done? Have you done it? People are like, what? I'm like, oh, okay. Let's put some preparation in here. But one of the things people often say to me is, Tammy, you can't prepare for everything.
Yeah.
And I get it. I agree. But that doesn't mean you should prepare for nothing and just kind
Yeah.
of wing it as you go. You can choose one or two of the most threatening things that could come your way. And over time, you will build up an arsenal of ways to defeat the challenges that do come your way.
And wouldn't it be safe to say that just the practice of going through those exercises always, when you can identify the ones that you can identify,
Right.
gives you the tools then to quickly and without really expending a tremendous amount of conscious effort, probably work through the unexpected problems when they do hit, right?
Right. And that's the key. You said unconscious, you
Yeah.
kind of push through it without even realizing some of the things you're doing.
Yeah.
That's why habits are so important because they help us push through. You don't use so much what I call thought energy or mental energy. I mean, it's like the best example I can think of is a recipe. If you have a recipe in your head, it's no big deal to cook it. But if you have a recipe where you're constantly referring to it, it's so much more taxing. And
Yeah.
that's where the preparation comes in. It makes it a little bit easier for you to actually execute moving forward, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Okay. So you exit the military life, and then it's kind of like, holy crap, nobody else does the same level of prep, or very few do, that we do, right? So I'd imagine that must have hit home fairly quickly. But I'm also really curious, with all the skills that you have, especially the newer ones. I'm sure you must have layered in some additional skills as you were going through your own certification and that too. What do you find yourself, I guess, most surprised at in terms of what you had to develop to become a great entrepreneur?
Well, in the military, things are really as bold and brave as I can be. Um, I'm also sometimes pretty tentative and anxious about certain things and
Mm.
lacking in confidence. It's just the truth. Because in the military, the plan is set and dry. Like it's there for you.
Yeah.
Like this is what you do. These are the steps you take, and there's really no options. So, like for example, in flying, this is a great example. When you're flying and you get to a point where let's say you're learning to fly and your instructor says, okay, it's time to solo. You, yes, ma'am, yes, sir. They get out and you go.
Yeah.
In the civilian world, it's more like, okay, it's time to solo. And the student will be like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready. I don't, because you have choices, right? And not that I didn't have choice in the military, but it'd be serious
Yeah.
consequences if I said no. So it forced me to do things that I might not have done. So when I got out of the military, one of the things I had to do was I wasn't being pushed out of my comfort zone. I actually had to choose to step out, which is a totally
Interesting.
different thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to go, this makes me really nervous and I don't know if people are going to like it and what if I'm not good? I have all those thoughts that everybody else has, but the key is what do you do with them? Do you can't just say I'm not going to have them. They're going to show up. They're there. Everybody has them. So it's like acknowledge, dismiss. Like they're there. Let's keep moving. And it was a choice. So that was probably the biggest thing that I had to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting, right? Because that is something, it's like in civilian life, I guess. Analysis paralysis is also another thing that really happens too, and so especially for business owners, I think, because there's so much information, we're trying to make the
Mhm.
right decisions always, and you can't be an expert in everything, and
Right.
so you don't have that team surrounding you that's going to either help push you forward, because it's like we're all going this direction and you got to be
Mhm.
coming with us, or the resources to really do the proper analysis and all the preparation and everything else that would be ideal if a person had the time to do it. And
Mhm.
so I'm fascinated by that as well. Like that must be an interesting thing that you've had to brush up as against from time to time in your entrepreneurial journey, because you don't have all that camaraderie,
Mhm.
and everybody else, who understands exactly what you're doing. Sometimes entrepreneurship can be lonely. Um, do you find that? I'm just curious if that was
Oh,
an
yes.
experience that you had.
Absolutely. I never intended to be an entrepreneur
Yeah,
ever. I kind of like the plan. I'd like to, stick with the plan and here I go and everything's cut and dry. And, you
yeah,
talk about analysis paralysis. I like to call that the Cheesecake Factory effect because if you've ever seen the menu at Cheesecake
yeah,
Factory, you're like,
yeah.
uh, okay, can I have the gluten-free menu? I just need like 5 options. And that's sometimes how I feel as a business owner. There's so many options, you do nothing.
Yeah,
And you just want somebody to hand you that gluten-free menu. So
yeah, yeah,
sometimes, and so it's definitely been a lonely journey, but if you recognize that, you can work to defeat that. That's one step. I would say, join other organizations, join groups where there's other entrepreneurs
yeah,
and, cause you're dealing with a lot of the same things. The other thing I think is really important, and unfortunately, I didn't do this until after I retired the military. The military has core values, and I never thought of creating my own personal core values.
mm,
But I read a book called Black Sheep by Brant Mensor, and it made me realize that I needed to have my own personal core values for multiple reasons. One, it helps you figure out what is your goal and are these decisions lining up with your goal? Where are you trying to be? And the other thing it does is that when you have a lot of people asking for your attention and your time, and if you're a lot of people are like me, they want to help everybody. I just love helping
yeah,
people.
yeah,
But you can't say yes to everything and you can't say yes to everyone. And how do you filter that? And when you have your core values established, it's much easier for you to figure that out.
yeah, yeah, completely. So now I'm really curious because Athena's voice isn't that old, and you're, creating now a second
Yeah.
business, and it seems like your passion is really on cross check right now, and so I'd imagine that's where you're kind of spending your time a little bit more so. Now, oftentimes when people are creating, multiple businesses, or they had one and then they move into another one, it's because the first one, maybe the business model wasn't quite right. You weren't realizing the goals that you had in that one, the success that you were looking for there. Tell me about that decision. What
Mhm.
was that based in? And, basically just tell us why you are creating a second business when that one is such a fresh one as well.
Yeah. Speaking of starting a second business, one of the things I've learned that is if I say I'm never going to do that, I might
Yeah.
as well just put it on my calendar and say it's going to happen at some point because that always happens, right? I'm never going to be an entrepreneur. I'm not going to be one of those people who has multiple business. Why do people have multiple businesses? I don't understand that. Um, so
Yeah.
I've learned that if I said never.
Yeah.
So I'm never going to have a podcast. So maybe I'll have one someday. Uh, so as far as that, why did I shift? Well, I think that so I haven't closed Thena's voice down and I don't plan on it because I think it has significant potential.
Yeah.
But what happened is that I was in the military for 20 years and I intentionally went all the way to 20 active duty years so that when I retired, I could spend my time with my children. Now, I'm not saying I was a bad mom because I wasn't with them. That those two things don't go together. You can be a great mom and work full time and be very busy, but I
Yeah.
wanted the time that I felt like I had lost with them. So that's why I worked so hard so I could be with my kids. And what happened is that I was getting stressed out and doing things that I didn't want to be doing, like the marketing and the sales and the negotiations and the logistics. And I was the bureau.
Yeah.
And I could have probably pushed it further had I brought people on board, but then that would have meant I would have had to lead those people. And I learned that when I first started feeling these things, I was really beating myself up inside. I was like, I'm such a failure. Like I
Hmm.
can't do this. I don't want this, but yet this is what I need to do and I don't have the motivation. It wasn't really the motivation. It was really, the time. And again, we're going back to defining success for me. In my mind, I had this a successful business is one that grows and everybody knows and it's a common name. It doesn't have to be that, and that's okay. And so when I realized it didn't have to be that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to keep this business going. I'm going to convert the business model into, instead of being a speaker's bureau, it's just going to be a referral business. So I have the
Okay.
website up. All the ladies are phenomenal speakers. And if people reach out and they want a good speaker, I match them. And instead of, it's just the model looks different. The transaction is different with the speakers. I send them to that speaker and we just have a referral fee instead of like me doing all the logistics and the sales. And because that was overwhelming me because I was also speaking and I
Yes.
thought
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't speak and run this by myself. And so that was why it shifted because my definition of success for my business actually came after my business was developed, right?
Ah, yeah.
So the second business is showing up because I this energizes me. Those tasks for Athena's voice they were energy sucking. And I
Hmm.
just felt depleted when I walked out of my office and went to hang out with my kids.
Yeah.
Now, when I dedicate time to working on cross check, you know, it's so, I know I can spend time away from my kids and have them, we're not going to spend every minute together. But when I come out, I'm energized and I'm ready to go. And because I feel good about what I'm doing, I'm so motivated and pumped up about this because I think it's just so important.
Yeah.
We talk about um, mental performance. And if you think about it on a spectrum, we have on one side, we have like a healthy mind. The other side of the spectrum, we have mental health crisis.
Yeah.
Now, closer to that mental health crisis, I would say is like mental health support and needing therapy and all that. And that's part of the process. But there's a gap in the middle. There's this space where people are like, well, I don't need a therapist, but I I need some help. And that's where mental performance training can come in. It fills that gap in and can keep you in that cycle of healthy mind more. And there's nothing wrong with going to seek mental health counseling. I've done it. But I'm just saying that you don't always need that. But how can you keep yourself in that healthy space? And so I think aviators need that because it's a very stressful business.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Now, I'm curious. Obviously, your background is in aviation,
Mm-hmm.
and so it makes a lot of sense for you to really be niched down into that industry or into that sector, very much so. Is this something that you have plans of going beyond? Because it's a pretty tight niche, right? So in
It
terms of
is.
scalability, what's the plans there? I guess.
Well, when I first started getting into business, one of the things I was told, especially with speaking, is that you need to niche down. You need to figure out your audience. And then once that audience says, "Oh, she's great," they might tell, it might, it basically expands to more and more people. But if you're
Yep.
someone who says, "Oh, I can speak about this to anyone," nobody really knows that you're their target audience.
Gotcha.
So I understood the concept with speaking, but I struggled to apply it. I was like, well, who should I talk to? Because my keynote is about perseverance. It's how to keep going when everything inside of you wants to just quit.
Yeah.
And that's kind of for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Um, but when I started this business of cross-check, passionate about aviators, I've had people say to me, but that just doesn't apply just to aviators. I'm like, I know, but I'm going to start somewhere. And when I prove myself and my credibility, then we can let it grow from there. So I'm absolutely willing to help others because it applies to everyone. But
Yeah.
I don't want to be that person. I can talk to everybody about, that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
It totally does. And I
Yeah.
think for those who are listening, I think this is really important. I really want everybody to to make sure that they fully, absorb what you're saying there, because I think it's a really great strategic approach to the growth of your business. Starting in that narrow niche, establish yourself, create the reputation, do the reps as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's all about that
Yeah.
training part of it. Get that honed in, and then you can start to expand, and it'll be much easier for you to break into the flight schools and the
Mm-hmm.
aviation community, because you already are connected into that in some form or another, I suspect. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like it just makes a lot of sense to start there. I think one of the challenges that a lot of people have is, okay, so how quickly do I start to move out of the niche? Because in the early days of a business, oftentimes there's a cash flow crunch, right? There's you're trying to get revenue in the door, and you there's a tendency to say yes to everything,
Yeah.
which then takes you away from the advantages of having that niche. So I'm not sure if you've already started to get pulled in some of those directions where it's like, yeah, I need to get some revenue in the door, and so this other opportunity came up, and so I'm saying yes to it, even though it's not really ideal, or not. Have you had that? And if you have, or maybe if you haven't, how will you deal with that when it comes up? Have you thought through that? challenge?
Yeah, I have that started to happen a little bit. Kind of with the background of what I'm talking about. There's other businesses out there that are like, "Oh, we want to add you to our team. We want you could help because now I'm, professionally speaking as well. So they okay, well, we know she can speak, so she could teach our content." And, I'm all for that if it's content that I believe in. Like, I am not a
Yeah,
person who has to be the head of the organization. I don't have to be in the limelight. I don't need any of that credit. I just want people to be impacted by what I'm teaching. So I have had some people approach me and I've had to say no to some opportunities, and we'll see kind of where that goes, because my focus really right now is just getting this course off the ground.
yeah,
But and, the other thing is that I I'm seeing already that there might be opportunity to create a course that's not just for aviators. Like the course I'm starting right now is Introduction to Building Confidence in Aviation, but it doesn't have to be specific to aviators. I've recently spoken to several police force organizations, and this stuff is so applicable to what they're doing.
yep,
And they need focus, they need to be on their game. Yeah, you can't just pull over in a cloud, doesn't apply, but you can't just turn your back when you're a police, right? And there's a situation in front of you, you have to be on it. So it's the
yep.
same kind of concept, and it applies to lots of things, whether it's surgeons or firemen. I mean, there's lots of professions out there that could use this. I mean, linemen, I was talking recently um, to linemen, the people who climb up on the poles and fix
Oh,
our
yeah,
electrical systems.
yeah.
It's intense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So,
totally. Yeah, you're right. Like there's so many different potential professions. So the one thing that I would say, just as what I've observed with, the clients that we've worked with and other entrepreneurs that I talk to, one of the things that I would say is that the reason why people start to deviate too quickly from their niche is because of the hunt for the revenue. And the reason why they get so hungry is that they're not quite as focused on doing the right things to really set up the leads in the funnel,
hmm
and the business development side of things within the niche. And so we get kind of complacent a little bit. And that could be from just not knowing any better, not knowing how to really get those leads to be coming in and really work the niche
hmm
itself. Or it could be just out of like I said, kind of complacency, or I don't want to say laziness, but it's just there's so many other things that we do that distract our attention from
hmm
really that core part. And so then we get into a little bit more of, well, whatever's kind of easy that comes to me, as opposed to be very intentional with our time
hmm
and our business development exercises, or the time that we have dedicated to that. So that would be one of the things that I would just say as well, is that if you really want to stay within that and try to really leverage the benefits, then it's like, okay, think through that, build that strategy, and then
hmm
be disciplined in executing on it. It's the execution, which I imagine you're probably an incredible executor. It's the execution where most people will fail. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've discovered since becoming an entrepreneur that I'm really good with coming up with the idea.
Yeah.
I'm really good with executing, but I struggle in the middle, making the connection of
Mhm.
how are we going to get from this is my idea, this is what I need to do.
Strategy.
And
Yeah.
knowing that about me, it's easier. You don't have to feel like a failure because I'm like, oh, I'm not good at this. That's not
Yeah.
what it's about. It's about
Yeah.
recognizing your weaknesses and actually getting help with your weaknesses and maximizing your strengths.
Yep.
That's how we reach our highest potential.
Yeah, exactly. And the highest value, you're going to get compensated in the highest value possible if you are living within your strength, for
Mhm.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is fascinating. I just thank you for sharing all this with us. And one question that I always like to ask too, before we go, is if you could go back in time to your younger entrepreneurial self, and I know that hasn't been that many years ago, so 2018, so 5 years ago, what would you, I guess, say to that younger entrepreneurial self? What would you tell her?
Yeah. What would I tell her? I would absolutely say, and I've already said this, so it seems like a little bit of a broken record, but start by defining what success means. I'm not talking, this is not, we're talking goals here. We're talking about the success, what makes you feel successful, and I think that's really, really important. And that was really where I struggled in the beginning. It's just, it didn't match, it didn't
Yeah.
go together. And then the other thing is just don't be afraid to ask for help. I will be
Yes.
honest and tell you, I definitely have that analysis paralysis or cheesecake factory effect when it comes to asking for help, because I feel like there's so many people out there that just send you these messages out of nowhere, want to help you. And
Yeah.
I don't know what their intention is and I don't know who they are. So that, how is that helping you? You know, the piece of advice right there. I would say when you find people that you can trust, that's where you tap into them and say, hey, I need someone to help me with accounting. I need someone to help me with, who can you recommend? And
Yeah.
don't be afraid to invest a little bit in that.
Yeah, totally. Embed yourself into that community of support, right? The entrepreneurial community, and that's really what we're trying to do here with Amplify Your Business. Is we're trying to bring the community of entrepreneurs together, share the stories, share the challenges, see if there's something that we can learn from each other, so that we don't all make the same mistakes. Which there's some mistakes that kind of every entrepreneur kind of goes through and makes, and
Yeah.
sometimes they're really costly. And so just understanding some of that, and just like what you said, I loved your piece of advice to yourself is just really trying to figure out what does success look like, because oftentimes we're chasing something that is really not something that matters to us, but it's because that's the norm, that's because what everybody else talks about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, I personally would never want to be Elon Musk, or Jeff Bezos and so on. I wouldn't want to sacrifice what those gentlemen had to sacrifice to get where they're at right now. I don't even know if they're happy where they're at, right? So
Yeah.
I would be much happier, helping people and doing the right things as opposed to being cutthroat and so on, right? Just for growth.
There's two things that really I can point out that made me come to that realization. The first one, somebody said to me, "Hey Tammy, if you had any more business, could you handle it?" Because
Mm,
I was all kind of down on myself because I'm like, we don't have enough speaking gigs. And I thought, no, I can't handle anymore right now. And so it was part of it was self-sabotage. Ultimately, I didn't even realize it. But the other thing somebody said to me was, being in the military, you have this career and then you end and you have another career. That's what I thought. But he said to me, what do you want your life to look like in 10 years? And I thought about my kids and where they're at. And I was like, well, in 10 years, my youngest will be 18.
yeah,
And I thought he said, you can have one business look like this. And then when, in 10 years, you can shift it and make it something else that's more, conducive to your lifestyle. And that kind of hit me and made me go, yeah, I can do this then. I mean, I can still have
yeah,
my business now, but it doesn't have to look like what I think it's supposed to be. I can grow it later. So it can
yeah.
change.
Yeah, completely. And this is the wonderful thing about being an entrepreneur is we're in the driver's seat on that, right?
Yeah.
So we
Yep.
get to make those decisions, and really guide it, but we have to do it with intention. And I think also with that mental performance, in mind. So I can't wait till you get to that point at some point in the future where you expand beyond that, because I think there's a lot of people that could really benefit from what you know. So that's really exciting.
Yeah. Thank
So
you.
if somebody wanted to reach out to you just to connect, to ask you questions, to learn more about the program, if there's aviators here on the, listening to this particular episode, and they want to, take some performance coaching, how do people reach out to you, I guess?
Yeah. Um, my favorite way of connecting is actually LinkedIn. So I'm on LinkedIn, Tammy Barlette. But for those, if you're interested in getting some mental performance coaching or you want to know more about my confidence course, you can go to my website, which is tammybarlette.com, and you can click on get more information. And there's a webpage specifically for the course that's on there that you can get more information on that.
And it's going to be released November 5th. Whether it's 100% or 80%, it doesn't matter. It's getting released on November 5th, right?
It is. I have already. It's 4 modules. I've recorded the first one, and I already got somebody signed up, so I have to do it. It's done. It's done deal.
That's motivation right there.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I remember listening years ago to a podcast, and this person was talking about course development and stuff, and that's what he was saying is he said, I don't typically build the course before I start to sell it. I try to sell it first, because then I determine whether or not there's a
A
product
need.
market fit. And it also motivates the hell out of me to not miss any deadlines, because
Yeah.
if he was like me, like I'm super deadline driven, and so I'll procrastinate the shit out of things. if I have the ability to do that. But if there's a deadline, then it's like, no, boom, I'm focused now, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. Remember when I had my first triathlon, I was training, but once I actually signed up, something just shifted. I was like, oh,
yeah,
game on.
yeah,
I got to
yeah,
do this
yeah. This
now.
is serious now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. Really appreciate you. Appreciate what you're doing, and the best of luck as you grow your business. And for those who are listening today, I hope you guys got a lot out of this episode. And if you enjoyed it, check out the archives over at amplifyyourbusiness.ca. That's where you're going to find all the past and future episodes there. And of course, you can find us on all your major podcasting platforms. So just search Amplify Your Business there. Until next time, everybody, have a prosperous day.